working now.
This came into hard works. I didn't even look at it, I thought I'd hand it over. So you can or the,
Awesome, thanks.
yeah.
Oh, good.
Because you don't have enough reading.
I don't.
Yeah. That's good.
Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to the first finance meeting of 2023. I want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, including our neighbors, the Shannon First Nation and the Shuuk First Nation. Please be sure to have your cell phones turned off for the duration of this meeting. As you'll see, we've rearranged the furniture for the new year. Actually, it's temporary. We'll just try this out and see. We've been listening to what residents have had to say, and so we've already had one meeting where we are doing a lot of swiveling in our chairs because we actually can't see each other very well. So we'll take it a little bit slower, but we're trying. We're going to see how it goes. Council, are there any additions to the agenda?
I move adoption of the agenda.
Thank you.
Second.
Second by Mary Lou. All in favor? Opposed? Carried? Thank you. There are no presentations. Public participation. Is there anyone from the community that would like to speak? Please state your name and street for the record, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Gary Smurfett at 3950 Gilbert Drive. On the committee agenda tonight, this afternoon, is a staff report on the draft budget for 2023 through 2027. The report's recommendation is to discuss the options. Now, the documents provided in this report, as taken from the website, were quite incomplete. And only by coming in at 3:30 was there a handout which better explained what was being proposed. It makes it hard for the public to better understand what is happening or what is being considered by you for decisions on options. When I look at, say, page 25 of the 26 that we were given, there's a summary of the year-to-date spending of all operations, and that's less than 50% of the budgeted amount. 50%. We've already finished the fiscal year, and I don't know how you as a council can make decisions on a 2023 budget when you don't have information for the 2022 fiscal year. In fact, there's half of the budget is not accounted for. I haven't had the opportunity to go through the detailed sheet that was provided at 3:30, So I'm basing these comments on what was in the agenda package. Also, it would be helpful to have, as we have had in the past at budgets, and I've been attending them for about 8 years, to have a spreadsheet that includes the information related to past years, what the past budget was and what we actually spent, so that you can see the trend as to what is going on. But, you know, looking at the past helps you, but you have to look to the future. When I looked at some of the other details that were provided in the report, $15,000 for a building bylaw fees update. Well, our building inspector now is on 5 days a week. The old one was 4 days a week, and he did bylaw enforcement as well. Surely the building inspector can redraft the bylaw during that time to look at fees. And while he's doing that, he might update the bylaw so that we're not referring to the Greater Vancouver Water District, Victoria Water District, which doesn't exist, or we're referring to community sanitary sewer systems, which don't exist, you know. So the bylaws definitely needed some attention. There's a contract that we have with an engineer to provide consulting services here. And it's basically 1 day a week. And that can be spread out to this week and done next week. Surely when we're looking at things like a parking lot for the old school site, we don't need to look at another $5,000 in budgeting for it. It can be accommodated in his work schedule. And the same with the subdivision servicing bylaw updating. I agree that it needs to be updated. These things always have to be updated on a regular basis. But could it not be done within the framework of this contract? We haven't had an overwhelming load of subdivisions so that it's snowballed and we're getting into big problems. There are requests for capital expenditures in the sheet that we have. Usually these are accompanied by a detailed report with references to reserve fund allocations and things like that. And again, I'm just speaking to what was presented in the package out there. None of that was provided, and I would humbly suggest that that's something that should be looked at the end of the budgeting rather than in the beginning here. As well, requests for extra staffing, again, they need careful consideration. The request for, and it was included in that sheet as a fait accompli for the 2023 budget, an administrative legislative services assistance. When you look at the tasks that are included in there, most of those tasks are things that the CAO's position should be doing, reviewing policies and procedures, reviewing compliance with contracts and things like that. That's part of a chief administrative officer's requirements. And then under planning, there was a proposal to pay an extra $50,000 next year to have our consultant planner train a member of staff to do things related to planning, processing of that, and that would be 1 day a week. Well, that $50,000 for the planner is one set of money. Now that person that's being trained is out of its position for a day a week. You're going to be required to backfill that as well. And when that training is completed, what is the objective? Is it to eliminate the planning contract? You know, none of that's explained in the proposal at all. You know, I think I'll just stop there. Time's running out. I just believe it's a bit premature to be looking for direction and options and things like that at this stage without better information being provided. Specifically, the first thing, up-to-date accounting. I mean, I don't know, maybe you know exactly what amounts are included in the printouts and what aren't. But when I see things in there that show $50,000 for this item in the budget, nothing has been spent to date, and then the projection, as I saw in the sheets that were given out today, a projection that $50,000 is going to be spent in 2022 and $50,000 in 2023 and 2024. I have to say, it's not right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak?
Good evening, Avril from Windfall Road. A back up to what Gary said. I too, there was a lot of confusion over the paperwork explaining the budget, and in there it suggests these amounts can be spent or they can go into reserves. And I really strongly suggest put everything into reserve and address the wish list as the year goes on. You get your feet wet and you gain that much more knowledge financially. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? We will have a presentation a little bit later in the on the agenda that will explain the material that was in the agenda for us today. We received this information as well at the same time that you did. So this is all new to us. Okay, so going on to the number 4 of the agenda, adoption of minutes of the Finance Committee meeting of December 12th. May I have a motion that the minutes be adopted, please?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Gray, seconded by Councillor Shukin. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, there's receipt of minutes. There are none. Business arising, none. Reports, Councillors update. I have a verbal report. December seemed like a very short month, especially with holidays and closing down with the snow. So I participate in quite a few community events. It seems to, those sorts of things happen throughout the year, but there seems to be seasonally there's more each time. So some of the things that council had participated in or were invited to was the pancake breakfast at the fire hall, which was a lot of fun. Councillor Gray is very good at telling me how to serve up sausages. So there was 4 of us that were able to be there on that particular day. We were there for a couple of hours. We also had a second event that day, which was an invite down to the wardroom. So the Royal Canadian Navy had a community holiday reception, and 2 of us were able to attend that. There were several other councillors across the region that were there. So Mayor Little and I had gone on behalf of Machosen. A lovely event. There was some very prestigious awards that were presented to 2 of our military personnel. December 13th, the Great Victoria Public Library, that was my first meeting. They also had their last meeting of the year. They had a festival lunch. 6 new board members are on their team. Super friendly and passionate about their work, so I'm looking forward to that. And they also said goodbye to the 6 outgoing. Former Councillor Anthony McKinnon, who was the chair. That was his last day. December 14th, the West Shore Parks and Recreation had a meeting with their tenants. This is not something I don't think they've done too much in the past. So it was very interesting meeting and greeting with the owners and team of the Shamrocks and the Grizzlies, and hopefully I'll have more to report on that in the future. And then the snow came, so all sorts of stuff got cancelled. However, the council was given the opportunity to participate in serving a Christmas lunch at our place, and 3 of us were able to make that. Councillor Epp was there, and myself and Mayor Little. It's an incredibly cold day. It was fine out here, but the wind chill downtown was terribly cold, and just outside the door, lots of tents flapping in the winds. Sad, I have to say. It is the reality of what's going on in our communities. After the luncheon, we were given a tour. There was just 3 of us. Councillor Epp had already left. Of the facility, and it's quite an amazing place for people to go to. They do have showers. It's about the only shelter in this region that actually offers showers to our homeless community. They have computer rooms, so they're able to connect to a different world, friends, and seeking jobs perhaps. They had a spiritual room that they have different things going on, wellness, health, different faith, that sort of thing. Okay, so then I think that's all I have for that. Yes, so we'll go on to the next one. Actually, there is one more thing I wanted to say, and it does pertain to questions that brought up at public participation, as well as our presentation we're going to have. So typically, council has hosted budget meetings during the day, separate from the finance meeting in councils past, and each year, probably at least in the last 8 years that I've attended them. And often they're in the mornings and on a different day from the council meeting. And they've been called budget workshops. What we're going to see today is the draft budget, which you saw in the agenda package. What we're trying to do is give consideration to the council members who actually do work full-time. And so, as well as the accessibility to residents to be able to come in later, perhaps being off of work instead of at 9, 10, or 11 in the morning during the week, and our staff availability. So future budget meetings will be separate from the finance meeting, but we've immersed it in this one as our first meeting, and we are listening to our residents, so this is why there's a few changes, not just the furniture. Okay, so 7B, page 5, the Greater Victoria 2023 budget and 5-year financial plan. Council, may I have a motion that the committee recommend council approve the budget for the Greater Victoria Public Library?
I would move for discussion.
Okay, moved by Councillor Shukin, second by Mayor Little. Discussion?
Okay. Thanks very much. In some ways, no discussion, but I have a quick question. Has the new amount been factored into the proposed budget for 2023? And through you, Councillor Donaldson, maybe to Suman?
Yes.
Or CA?
Please.
Sorry, the Greater Victoria one, no, it hasn't.
Okay, thank you very much. That is what I thought I had seen, but I just wanted to confirm that for sure. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Comments?
I just have a comment. I have a comment. So this represents about a 5.95% increase. So that's about $60 or $58 per person in Metchosin. And some people will say, well, kids don't vote and they don't have homes, but they do use public libraries. I know my child use a public library a lot. And so I would be in favor of this motion.
Thank you. Any other comments, Council? Okay, so call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried? Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to the 7C under report, staff report for the 2023-2027 draft budget. I'd like to call our Chief Financial Officer, Sue-Lynn Paneski, to present.
Tell me if you need me to relocate this podium, because I have back to some of you, so.
Is it still on the green tape?
Yes, I need to. Okay. So the purpose of the meeting today, instead of me reading through the report, which you can obviously do, is to provide context to the report, the content, and then next steps, and some of the reasons why some of the information is presented the way that it is in today's package, which is just the first introduction of the budget. Quick overview: legislatively, we are required to produce a 5-year financial plan, and the deadline for that is on or before March 15th of each year. So in the past, historically, Metchosin has always passed those bylaws way before May 15th deadline, but that's a requirement according to the charter. So to produce this bylaw, so the register updates its 5-year financial plan, which includes operating, capital, and supplemental or one-time budgets and requests. So each financial plan covers a rolling 5-year period which remains in effect until a new financial plan is adopted. So that means that for this year it's going to be 23 to 27, next year's 24 to 28, and it just keeps rolling on a 5-year cycle. So today's goal is, first and foremost, is to introduce the 2023 to 2027 financial plan to the Finance Committee and the public. Keeping in mind that this is the first time that's been presented, so there'll be lots of opportunities in the future for discussions and amendments. To provide timing and details of upcoming financial planning meetings, what will be discussed and presented at upcoming meetings, and also most important, to add context to the staff report that you see in the package today. So budget timeline, we will add if as necessary. So today's meeting is just that, it's an introduction. So presentation of summary budget information, and it is a starting point for deliberation. Okay, at the next meeting, which is in 2 weeks on January 23rd, it's going to have opportunity to discuss and clarify various parts of the operating budget. Going forward on February 6th and 20th, the presentation will be in capital, as well as one-time or supplemental requests and budget. Again, there'll be opportunities for discussing and clarification of the various components that will be in those two budgets. And going forward, should committee deem it to be necessary to have any additional meetings, and we will have those meetings accordingly as well. So the plan here is to have council approve the financial plan by mid-March. Okay, so the budget in summary, the reason that the detailed information was not included in your package is just that, as you can appreciate, we are still processing a lot of 2022 expenses. They're coming in fast and furious, and we are nowhere close to concluding the year 2022. So the draft budget as it stands, it's a 8.4% general tax increase. There are very few items that are included in this tax increase, which will be detailed further down in the presentation. And of course, all the proposed items are subject to council approval. We will also identify some of the areas to focus on and discuss various parts of the budget at upcoming meetings. So before we can look forward, let's take a look back at 2022. It was a challenging year in many aspects, but I'm happy to report that the district successfully concluded a 3-year QP agreement, which expired December 1st, 2020. So staff year was without a contract all of 2021 and 2022. Like all municipalities, the district faced significant cost pressures and supply chain disruptions and delays. We can say that's attributable to COVID or other things, but those are realities of what we face and we are still currently facing. The district administration also fully transitioned back to in-person operations. Another point that the community is very aware of is that the district officially exceeded the 5,000 population based on the 2021 census. So with that, what that means is the population that exceeds 5,000, the district is responsible for 70% policing cost. That doesn't include some costs that the district bears 100% of it, so that those costs include support staff. That's one of the items that the district pays 100% of the cost. Compared to when the district's population was less than 5,000, the district was responsible for paying 30% of the policing cost. The district also is transitioning to stabilization with significant staffing changes in 2022. In 2022, we saw the departure of the CEO, the deputy corporate officer, the deputy finance officer, and the building inspector. So here are the major components of the budget. You'll see that standards operating, capital, which we will discuss at upcoming meetings, supplemental, one-time, and of course reserves. Operating fund, operating budget as a whole, it provides for municipal services, including legislative and general government, so that's council and general government administration, finance, IT, protective services, that includes police, fire, emergency programs, building inspections, and bylaw enforcement. Engineering and public works, roads and related infrastructures, roads and streets maintenance, and planning, parks and trails, cultural, which includes the library services, and community support, including things like grants and aid. So that forms the operating budget. So some significant impacts on the 2023 general operating budget. Staff did not apply over the board inflationary increases, so it wasn't just drag and drop. Okay, we only increased in areas which are what I would refer as non-discretionary, those being utilities, contractual obligations. Those are the two major components of the non-discretionary expenses. And where there is need for inflation, we applied a modest 2% inflation. So there are some supplemental requests that are included in this draft, and that totaled $107,023. So you'll see details of those in the upcoming slide. Again, keeping in mind that any supplemental request is subject to council approval. So some department highlights. Administration, as I mentioned earlier, there were significant staffing changes that included departures of the CAO, the Deputy Corporate Officer, and the Deputy Finance Officer. So at this point, the department is slowly transitioning to stabilization with the new staff. So there's one supplemental request for this department, which is the Legislative Services Assistant, which is commonly referred or known as Council Clerk. That's a term that I find is a bit outdated, so I'm choosing to call Legislative Services Assistant instead. So the proposed responsibilities for this position is to provide support for legislative services, such as agenda, minutes, meeting coordination, communication, social media, and oversee centralized booking for the community use of the space at the school facility. Moving on to protective services for the RCMP, we are still working on the assumption that per officer cost is $200,000. Of course, at this point, we have no actuals, so this is just historically a number that has served us well for budget purposes. It's rounded at $200,000 per officer. So in the past, the long-standing assumption is that we will phase in the 15% tax increase as required to increase our share of the policing costs from 30% to 70%. We will increase that over 6 years as opposed to 1 year, which, as you can appreciate, that's a huge impact. So the tax for the policing is $77,000 annually, so that's equivalent to 2.5% increase in municipal taxes, at the same time drawing down on the policing reserves. Still staying with protective services, but moving on to fire and emergency services, some of the few supplemental requests that are included in this budget includes enhanced firefighters call-up pay in the amount of $8,000. The VoIP, which is Voice over Internet Protocol phone system for emergency program for $1,000. Additional casual labor for emergency program, so that's $3,280. And part-time casual administrative assistant for the emergency program to support file management and documentation. That is proposed at $8,500. Building inspection and bylaw enforcement. So the department saw retirement of the former building inspector in November 2021. And the current building inspector was not recruited until past June, so June 2022. So staff is requesting a comprehensive building bylaw fee review that is a proposal of $10,000. So the purpose of this proposal is not simply to update the bylaw. It is to do a comprehensive full cost fee analysis to provide the services that we provide builders and applicants as a municipality. We're looking at not just the building inspector's time, but also the time that's the overhead that's required from the admin assistant. And also, we also want to look at, work into the fee, what it will cost to replace the building inspector's vehicle at some point in the future. So at some point, that will have to be replaced, and the intention is to look at having part of the cost recuperated through the building fees. Okay, so because we are unsure of the timing of the completion of the bylaw review, we're choosing to be conservative and not project any additional revenue for 2023. So just for your information, the current bylaw has not been updated for a long time, as Mr. Smurfett has indicated, but it's from the mid-1990s, so it's a bit of a vintage. So moving on, department highlights for engineering and public works. The province brought in new requirements last year for the requirements for testing of ditching material. So that is causing a little bit of a headache, if I could use that word, for the district. So all now to say is that we will need to look at further as to what the ditching program is going to look like, and more importantly, what are the requirements for testing of the ditching material. Okay. And another aspect of the engineering and public works that will require further analysis is the road replacement and maintenance program. And none of these costs have been, in addition to ditching, with the exception of ditching, the road replacement and maintenance program analysis has not been included in the current budget. Planning, it is quite evident with the completion, almost completed renovation of the school and having the two commercial tenants in the school that a comprehensive village core planning study is required for not just for the school, but really as the core as a whole. So the request the cost that's been proposed for this study, and it's included in the budget, is $8,000 to engage a parking consultant to do the study. We have asked our current contractor engineer, and it's been indicated that is not his area of expertise, so it is his preference that, and the plan's preference, that a parking consultant be engaged for this project. And the other item that's been requested is $5,000 for the climate action plan. This is to accommodate the expanded scope of the plan. So there was a budget of $10,000 for the plan in 2022, but council is looking to expand the scope of the plan, so we are requesting additional funding accordingly. Supplemental, that's something I refer to as supplemental, but it's commonly called one-time request here. It's just that. So supplemental can be one-time or ongoing additions to existing service levels. So examples can include particular study, minor capital replacement, high level of services on the existing program, are just some of the examples. So funding for any supplemental requests is commonly funded by surplus, which obviously the district will not have an indication of until at least February, when all of the 2022 expenses are captured and processed. And of course, again, it's always subject to council approval. I've mentioned these items previously, but these are the items that have been included in the current draft version of the financial plan. Thus, the legislative services assistant, legal fees for bylaw enforcement, freedom of information requests, The freeware information was contracted in partway through 2022, and we have seen, based on year-to-date, a significant request and therefore expense for that. So the proposal is to, for an additional $5,000 to accommodate the requests that have been coming in or expected to be coming in. The enhanced fire department call-up pay, that's been, you've seen that in previous slides. Same with the VoIP phone system and the casual labor for the emergency program, along with admin assistant for the emergency program. So these are all the supplemental requests that are included in the current draft budget. So how do we fund the services? Surplus is one way. The district usually has varying amounts of surplus from prior year's operations, but that does not mean we cannot have a deficit in any given year. And past practice has always we use a certain amount of surplus to balance the budget each year to prevent overtaxing. So the expectation is that the departments will be given sufficient funds to carry out mandates, but some savings will occur based on timing is one of them, and also the actual expenses or revenue that come in. We do the best when we do budgeting, but that's just that, it's guesstimate. And when the actuals, you always see a variance between the budget and the actuals. Okay, property taxation. That is the district's majority of a district's revenue source. So once all the other funding sources are considered, budget must be balanced through property taxation. Now, as there's limited growth in the community, we are not able to mitigate tax increases through additional revenues through growth. So when we're setting the tax rate or the mill rates, we look at the assessment that BC Assessment provides us and make the changes accordingly to reach the revenue that we require. So what that means is that if your assessment has gone up by 20%, that does not translate to your tax increase of 20%. So we will look at the assessment and adjust the mill rate to achieve the required revenue that we will need to fund operations. So typically the property tax rate bylaw cannot be set until late April or mid-May because we have to wait for the final property tax roll from BC Assessment. We cannot do any tax rate bylaws without that information from BC Assessment. Another source of funding services is debt. Municipalities are only permitted to incur any debt for the purpose of capital purposes. So no debt for operations. And rules around borrowing are clearly identified in the community charter. So the district currently has no debt or any long-term borrowing. If council and the community chooses, you can incur some debt, but of course it's subject to public process depending on the amount and the term of length of the debt. So by putting up this slide, I'm neither encouraging or discouraging debt. I'm just saying here's a source of revenue that council may choose to consider. So to that last point of maybe council should consider it to form part of the long-term capital funding strategies. Reserves. Municipalities are permitted to set aside funds and reserves for authorized specific purposes only. And reserve funds must be used for the intended purposes. So you are not authorized as a municipality to set aside reserve for example, road maintenance, road replacement, and use it for building replacement, for example, provided, unless you receive council approval for borrowing from between the reserves, the capital reserves. So the district currently has asset replacement reserves, such as the roads, the building and equipment reserves. We have the fire vehicle and fire capital replacement reserve, general capital reserve, and school building improvement reserve. So looking forward 5 years, the new revenue that's currently projected to be required for 2023 is almost 277,000. That translates to 8.4 tax increase in general taxes. And moving forward, so keep in mind that anything subsequent to 2023 is based on the increase over 2022. So if we do end up with 8.4, the increase in 2024 over 2023 is the difference, which is at 3.1%. Okay? So just that speaks to the note at the bottom, which means any changes in year one, that being 2023, will impact all the future years. Okay, so the next steps. The next meeting is being proposed for 2 weeks, which is January 23rd. So as provide additional details or any operating budget items that the committee will be requesting. To also provide the committee with more opportunity to ask questions and make recommendations on adding, removing items from the budget, and so on and so forth. And also to provide the residents with opportunities to comment on what is or not being included in the draft budget. So that's for the operating expenses. And going forward, at the following meeting, which is on February 6th, at that time, the capital budget will be introduced and discussed. So any changes from the January 23rd meeting will be incorporated into the February 6th meeting. The next meeting is being proposed, subsequent to that, is February 20th. At that time, depending on progress, we may still be discussing capital budget, but also at this time that the supplemental one-time budget will be introduced, because at that time, staff will have a better, pretty good idea of what the projected surplus will be. Okay, so this is another opportunity to discuss and ask questions, remove or add one-time requests as appropriate. And then again, as I mentioned before, any previous changes, any changes from previous meetings will be incorporated as well. Okay, and the last bit is just wanted to say we will obviously schedule any additional meetings as necessary, and I'm available for any questions, comments, and so is of council and Councillor Donaldson. Okay.
Thank you, Sue. Committee, do you have any questions for Ms. Tarnowski? Anyone?
Yes, I do. Sorry, thank you. I do have a few questions. I don't want to get too jumpy though, and because I know this is just the very beginning of the considerations. But okay, but general question: policing costs are going to be a very significant part of our budget going forward. And again, 4 officers to me seems a very appropriate level. So let's keep our fingers crossed that we can maintain that. But a question through you, Councillor Donaldson. Is there going to be a consideration about how we use the police reserve fund? Is it a matter of breaking it out into 4 equal portions over 4 years, or would it be set down? We probably don't know that yet, but any thoughts on options with that?
I just read it, Cody.
Sure.
So the plan right now is to step down. Again, just keep in mind we are working with guesstimates. We don't have final member strength. We're still in negotiation on the member strength, but it is to step down. So what's important to keep in mind is that a committee and ultimately council can choose to draw down on the reserve faster or slower, but the implication of that is that at some point you're going to have to pay for the full policing cost without using the reserve. So.
Thanks. It was pointed out earlier about the building fees bylaw, and there's a matter of 15,000 that I see on the one-time operating request. Would that be for, is that about legal costs, or is it consultants, or?
So that was consultant. So you will, I don't know if you noticed that, so there's 15,000 and 10,000.
Okay.
So I didn't actually talk consultant down to by 10,000 for the review. So it's a comprehensive review. Like I said, it's not just simply reviewing the bylaw. It's okay, for us to charge X amount of dollars for this building permit, how do we get this X amount of dollars? To make a really comprehensive and full cost analysis, making sure that we're recuperating all, or not just the direct costs, but overhead costs as well.
Okay. Thanks very much. And I just note that even now, with those fees being outdated, they still bring in significant revenue. I think the last report I saw was in the order of projected revenue of over $100,000, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm not sure it's over 100,000, but I just want to say that once we review it, we can
Okay.
collect more.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have some questions regarding the one-time. So the staffing ongoing options, there's not really one-times, because if we hire a administrative, what did you call it, legal services assistant, 71,000 plus, or including benefits, and then the next year it's 71,000. So it's not a one-time request. And so I'm reticent to recommend that we have another QP position, because I think, and I'm not sure, we're sort of heading into a recession or a slowing down of the economy. And what I do at home, which I think I feel like I should translate it to the district, is when we're faced with uncertainties, like we are with our policing costs, and we definitely need a new fire hall, we need to tighten our belts on some of the other requests. So I'll be in favor of doing things that we absolutely must do, and not doing other things such as the parking study, for instance, because when we do studies, I think it's good to do studies, but we need to do studies keeping in mind that it has to be actionable. Like, what can we do with that information? And I'm not sure we'll come up with more options that we've been given by Chris Kaur, who did talk about parking at the major site. And so those are my feelings. I just think this is not a time to be doing a lot of spending. This is a time, I feel, because we have an increase in inflation, and that has been documented within Canada. We've got an uncertain future. We've got uncertain policing costs. It could be $800,000, but it could be as high as $1.2 million. So that's quite a chunk of change from a chosen, and so I'm feeling that we need to tighten our belts and to be very fiscally prudent, and keeping in mind that some of these requests are they're not one time. They are an ongoing responsibility. We can't have a position open for a year and then close it again. So those are my comments. I have some other specific ones, but I think I'll wait until we discuss these again.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gray or Councillor Epp, any comments?
Not right now.
Okay.
I had just a question about the agricultural plan dollars. It's $40,000, but I recall previously it was about $20,000, and I wondered about that increase. And if we might ask the Agriculture Committee what they're recommending.
Through the chair, I can answer that question. So the Agricultural Committee had asked for money last year, thinking that they could take $20,000 and then match those grants. We're now fast forward over, to this point. they're no further ahead in terms of their funding. What we have been told by the Minister of Agriculture and other municipalities is that we need an agricultural plan to apply for OPMs or other people's money. So we have to spend some money in order to get money. We can't apply for grants, and I've tried, and it doesn't matter how sweet I am on the phone. They say, great, we love Metchosin, we've never heard from Metchosin. So attach your agricultural plan and we're away. We don't have an agricultural plan, so we're caught. And the farmers come back to me and quite honestly they say, really? You want me to write an agricultural plan? It is onerous. That we do have some templates, so it may not be $40,000, but it could be $40,000. And this is one I would argue that this is overdue in our community. We are a rural community. Agriculture is a component of our community. And in order for us to access other monies, provincial and federal, but mostly provincial, we need to have an agricultural plan. That's just the way it is.
Anything else, Councillor Gray?
I'll just take a minute.
Okay. Councillor?
Just was, and in speaking of grants, in the last council we did quite often talk about doing an active transportation plan, an active transportation study. And so I noticed that there isn't, it isn't listed in this year's budget. I know that's something that we were going to do. So I guess that's my question is what happened to that?
I don't believe there's ever been an active transportation plan budgeted in the previous budget. So that's definitely, if the committee would like that to be added, that can be added for the next meeting.
Yeah. We actually, Councillor Shukin and I have a team meeting tomorrow with a couple of fellows from Urban Systems just to get a ballpark idea of how much that might cost for Metchosin. So we can talk about that the next meeting.
That'll definitely be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, and on that note, I have a question about the shoreline plan. Asking taxpayers to fund that, I'm wondering if maybe we go further with the engaging all of the communities that have a shoreline on this lower island, the Capital Regional District and the province. Perhaps they're the ones that should be having a shoreline plan. Yes, Mayor Little.
Or maybe they already have plans that we could extrapolate to Metchosin. On that, if I could ask another question.
Sure.
On MEASC, we now have Mr. Fletcher, who has done considerable work on shoreline, not only mapping, but also, I imagine, I can't remember the specific documents, but also mitigation of risks. I'm wondering if we could engage MEASC because we have the advantage of Mr. Fletcher being on the committee now. He knows a great deal about the shoreline. He was also a professor at Pearson College as well, very knowledgeable, and he's got an incredible amount of documentation on his website. But now we have him available.
Okay. Councillor Gray.
You know, I'm happy to investigate that with Gary between now and our next meeting. Through the
Awesome.
chair.
Thank you. Any other questions, Council? Yes.
Could you also investigate? Excuse me. Could you also investigate other neighboring communities whether they also have a shoreline plan that we could extrapolate?
I'll do that.
Any other queries, Council, for this evening? There's quite a bit of information this evening shared, both from the residents, our CFO, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of burning questions between now and the next budget meeting. Yes, Mary?
There's two things that I saw that was missing. I forgot about Bilston Creek monitoring. We didn't last year, but other years we've allowed, I think it was $1,200 that was allocated for Bilston Creek monitoring. that could be considered as well. And we've got the bridge repair, and we've got some engineer's report about Flesh Road Bridge. And so we'll need to deal with that. I think the estimate was 45 times 4. Less than 200,000. I can't remember what it was. 180,000 or so.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
So I did have one more question for the CFO on the, not on the summary, but on the general budget that's also in draft. There was a line item there about Neil Road stormwater management. Can you explain what that is? And if that does tie in with the Billston at all?
I'll have to check on that. I'm not sure if it ties into the Billston one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions, Council?
This will be one of the things that I have felt in the past comes up and surprises council from time to time is the road repair budget. And I think it often comes up before the actual budget is approved. Do you know what the timing could be for that road budget to come up this year?
So that's one of the things that has been discussed is we have a road repaving budget that needs updating. But that's where we're at. So nothing's been included in the budget, but we recognize that that's something that will need to be done. So then we'll need to have further discussion about that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Councillor.
If I could just ask through the chair, I'm wondering about the legal budget, the legal fees, and whether those are adequate. For example, under bylaw, we've had this experience of bylaws, not being maybe enforced as well as they might be, and the question of the legal advice and whether we're pursuing that enough, sort of in the legal side of things. Is the number that we see here just a reflection of last year's dollar value, or are we increasing it?
So there are several pots, if you will, for the legal expenses. Specifically for the bylaw, the proposal, which is included in this draft version, is for additional $10,000, but that's just specific to bylaw legal fees. The rest of them have remained the same as 2022.
Mary Lou?
I would also like to go back to looking at the first time requests, as Mr. Smurfett had mentioned, with a rationale background, and then those were very, very helpful for me to try and figure out whether I would vote yes or no for a particular one time.
Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Gray.
I just want to ask, we heard from Mr. Smurfett about the Legislative Services Assistant, and I read it a little bit different than Gary. It was saying that in order to free up time to do the work of higher function tasks such as bylaw and policy review and thorough risk mitigation and management, you needed the clerk underneath that to support that. Is that am I reading it right?
That's correct, Councillor Brewer.
Thank
It's
you.
looking at shifting responsibilities.
Any further discussion, Council? Or shall I call the question?
And the question is receiving for information?
Yes.
Oh.
I think so, right? Any more discussions? Yeah? No?
Okay,
We have a lot of work ahead of us.
we do.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I encourage the residents, those that are present tonight, those of your neighbors who are not, and those that are live streaming, to send us your questions as well. But most certainly try to attend the meetings. We will post those schedules.
I ask a practical question. So in the past, we've heard comments from the public. There haven't been that many at budget meetings, 4 or 5 of you, but that it was called a workshop, but it wasn't really a chance for the public to go back and forth. How are you going to structure that so that the members of our community have the ability to ask questions? There's in my mind, there is validity, and there's I think it's good to allow the community to ask questions up front, but there's no sense in asking at the end of the night when having a long litany. A back and forth is a better, and it's not amenable to this type of a meeting, but would be more to a workshop. Have you given some thought regarding how you would like to structure that to enhance public engagement but to at least move us along?
Well, from what I have seen in the conversations, the limited conversations that we have had, when we've called it budget workshop, it really wasn't a workshop because there wasn't a lot of brainstorming and engagement with the community. Having said that, Councillor McKinnon, who was the chair of the last 4 years of that committee, it was a budget meeting. You had the public participation in the beginning. He was pretty relaxed about the rules, so throughout the meeting, the 3 people, and I was one of them, were able to interject or put up her hand and be able to ask questions. I think that's something the council does need to discuss. What is the format we're going to do this? Because really, I think it's very important for our residents to have some input on where their monies are going, and very possibly will have some good ideas to share with us. That's been my experience in the 2 terms that I've been attending budget meetings, and I've learned a lot each time. So I would encourage council to really think about how you would like to do that. And we did, all of us when we were campaigning did hear public engagement, and it's of great value to us when we're dealing with all of these monies. Okay. So moving on to correspondence. I have no correspondence, and we do not have bylaws or other business. So that is all there is for this evening's finance agenda. And I would ask, move and second that the meeting be adjourned.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Can I ask what meeting is taking place tonight at 7?
Council meeting.
Only the council.
Yes.
Can I ask a financial question here now?
We're just about to move, so good for adjournment.
What did we pay Chris Core?
I don't have that information.
Can that be made available? Because there's an awful lot of financial things that are not clear. That's one of them.
I'm certain that will come up in the budget as we reconcile for 2022.
So we could make a commitment that we could have those figures available at the next meeting?
And a little more information on what the auditorium, is there a set rental fee on that, or is that going to be coming up? Is that new for renting out the auditorium? Are we receiving any rent from the auditorium?
This time the district hasn't received any funds from the gymnasium that I'm aware of, and it's still under renovation. So it's...
I think the floors were just, haven't quite been completed.
Right, and I believe Councillor App was informing us recently that there was some acoustic boards being built.
Yeah.
Even though, so it's being rented for free till...
That I don't know.
Okay, could I
Talk with that?
get information on that too, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
So motions on the table.
Motions on the table. We have a motion to adjourn, a seconder. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, everyone.